So guys, now it's my privilege to invite my mother to come and preach to us today. And before you get up and before we clap, I want to say that we can listen to you, Mom. It's been such an emotional morning. I was saving it all for now. I shouldn't have. I should have got it out earlier. Because my life and my bloodline and my heritage that I was a part of was going in a very different direction. And my mom stood and said no more. And she said, we are going to change the path of these Tedders, not only for her and my dad, not only for me and my sister, but for our kids and their kids and their kids. And now, Mom, we are not on a path that's going in a very dark space, but we are walking in this beautiful path that you have won for us. And that's why I listen to her, and because I'm very scared of her. But you don't have to be scared of her to listen to her today. You can trust that she has fought a battle that has taken her from here to here, and we can actually claim some of that testimony today. We can partner with that, and we can get excited for that. Mom, you carry so much. You have stood so strong through so much, and we're so excited to receive from you today. Let's welcome her.
Okay, it's coming. There we go. Okay, so first of all, I just want to ease me into this. I want to just tell you that, Hannah, you will be making the beds by yourself, dear. I can tell you from many years of experience. Stephen's favorite saying when I tell him to make his bed is, Mom, you forget that when I was at boarding school, I used to make my bed. But he forgets that he used to have many other people to do it for him at boarding school. So that was my mood lightener, but I did have another one. For those of you who were at the women's conference, and I'm not going to tell your story, Jilly, I said to Jilly, can I tell your story? But I'm not going to. But if you want to know what that story was, just go and ask her. It's classic. Classic. It's honestly the best icebreaker I've ever heard. So I'll keep you curious. Wow. The last few weeks have been intense. I don't even know what to say about the last few weeks, except God has been taking us all on a very, very deep and personal journey. I kind of feel like it started with Roger preaching on disqualification, and then Chanel gave us permission to feel and own our pain. And there was a lot of crying. And then Mel just took us a little bit further and shared her pain and her growth from it. God has been doing some deep personal work, and it is necessary. And I believe for some of us, the work has only just begun. Embrace it. Let him heal and restore you face to face with Jesus in his arms. There is just no better place to be. But why? And then what? We are healed, restored, and set free for a purpose. There is a mission. We're on a mission. And we can't do it alone. You see, when we're in pain, the tendency is to retreat, isolate, disconnect, and disengage. And I think the enemy wants nothing more than to keep you from your people. The ones who are going to help you on your journey to freedom, and the ones who are going to co-mission with you on the task that has been set before us. So what is the task? To bear fruit. fruit that will not spoil. And I'm not lying to you, because this is what Jesus says in John 15. He says, love one another the way that I have loved you. This is the very best way to love. Put your life on the line for your friends. You are my friends when you do the things I command you. I'm no longer calling you servants, because servants don't understand what their master is thinking and planning. No, I have called you friends, because I've let you in on everything I've heard from the Father. You did not choose me. I chose you. I chose you. I chose you. And put you in the world to bear fruit. Fruit that won't spoil. As fruit bearers, whatever you ask the Father in relation to me, he gives you. But remember the root command, love one another. So this is a very kind of direct command from Jesus to bear fruit. That's our mission. But I love how it is sandwiched so beautifully between two other commands to love. There's a command to lay down your life for your friends, and then he ends it off with, but remember the root command, to love one another. Because it seems it's impossible to be a fruit bearer without those two things. It's like the sandwich without the bread. So I'm actually going to be speaking to us today about kingdom friendship. You see, friendship is not optional. It's a kingdom principle. And yet, friendship globally is in crisis. Do you know that around 43% of the world's population consider themselves to be deeply lonely, lonelier than ever before, and yet more surrounded with people and opportunities than ever before, and yet deeply lonely? See, I feel like this is another one of the enemy's strategies to derail us so that we won't be fruit bearers. God himself operates out of relationship. The Trinity is his circle, and we get called to be in his circle. So if friendship is part of God's plan for us, then why is it such a deep source of pain for so many of us? So I thought, well, let's go to the scripture and see what it's supposed to look like. And I believe that I've got 6 kingdom strategies for us for friendship. And I'm not saying I've got them all right, but what I am saying is that these are my friendship goals. And strategy, key principle number 1, is friends have our back. Now, Jonathan and his armor bearer. I believe that this armor bearer is one of the unsung heroes in the Bible. Honestly, he is not even named. And yet, he catalyzed one of the greatest defeats of the Philistine army. And I'm going to set the scene for you here. The Bible says that there were 3,000 chariots in the Philistine army and 6,000 charioteers. And it actually says that there were as many people in the army as there are grains of sand on the seashore. Now that seems a little exaggerated. Come on, it can't be that many. I don't know how many that is, but it seems like it's a pretty big number, too big to even count. So that's the scene. It's a pretty large army. The Israelites were in a very tight spot. And so they were hiding. They were hiding in caves, in holes, and in cisterns. And actually, some of them had crossed across the Jordan and run away. And some of them had even joined the Philistine army. And when Saul counted his army, he had an army of 600 against this massive, unnumbered army. And something else to note was that there were no blacksmiths, because the Philistines wouldn't allow them to have blacksmiths because they were afraid that they would make weapons. So the only people in the Israelite army that had weapons were Saul and Jonathan. The rest of them had axes and pitchforks and pointed sticks. So this is their army. Cue Jonathan and his armor bearer. And this is what Jonathan says in 1 Samuel 14. So one day, Jonathan, son of Saul, said to the young man bearing his armor, "Come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side." I mean, crazy. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Guys, this guy is enthusiastic, positive. He is like Stephen, actually. Nothing, he says, can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Now, his armor bearer must have been thinking, what? Are you crazy? Do you know what he said? He said these words, "Do all that you have in mind. Go ahead. I am with you, heart and soul." Come on. I love that response. It is priceless. But let's just imagine what he might have been feeling. I mean, Jonathan had the courage. Jonathan wanted to go and take them on. He might not have been feeling that courageous. It seemed like a bit of an insane plan, if you ask me. But he did it because he backed Jonathan. And why could he back Jonathan? Because he knew him and he believed in him. See, Roger's been saying this whole year, we will all know as a team, if you know someone, you can understand them. Get to know people so that you can understand them. And when you know somebody, you can go to war with them because you want to back them and support them because you believe in them and their dreams. But to get to know someone and understand them, like the armor bearer must have known and understood Jonathan, takes time and it takes intention. And it takes great courage and faith. So I'm not going to even read this. I'm going to just tell you what happens in the story. It's just the most remarkable thing. So off they go, just the two of them. And they just went and approached the army. And they just started chaos. Jonathan marched in, and the armor bearer literally just slew people behind him. So it started off 20 dead men around them. Yes, let's go. And then confusion came upon the Philistine army. Panic broke out, and then there was an earthquake. So I kind of feel like God was like, yes, let me just egg you on, boys. Earthquake. And when Saul took a look at this, all he saw was the Philistines killing one another in chaos and panic. And that inspired and motivated them to come out of hiding and get involved. Now remember, there are not that many of them. But even those Israelites who had now defected and become part of the Philistine army had actually joined in, and there was chaos, and they actually defeated the enemy. How incredible. That is a miracle. That story needs to be told more. And this was because of the courage of one man, but also, as equally important, the support and backing of another. And it just reminds me of Daph and the conference, because actually she had the courage. She was the point woman, and she had this group of ladies behind her backing her. And that catalyzed a miracle. And I can honestly say this weekend was nothing short of a miracle. I think it's changed everything. And it also reminded me, and this is where I'm going to ask Keegan to put up the video. Are you there, Keegs? Okay, do you know? Okay. There you are, sorry, didn't even notice. Do you know which video? Can you put it? Yeah, okay, so.
Hello, Hillside. I'm away at the moment, but you guys are getting blessed with Tanya speaking this morning. And she's asked me to just share a little bit about a picture that God gave me about leadership, but it does pertain to friendship as well. And Bill Johnson has this saying that you have a point dog, like a dog that points, English pointer would point at a prey or whatever for the guy who's going to take out his shotgun and shoot the bird or whatever it is. But the point dog, then the other dog is a dog that points towards that dog. He doesn't point to a new prey, he just points to that dog. But I felt like God giving me a picture about the SWAT team. and preparation goes on, and then when the time comes to execute the plan, there's a point guy. He goes in first, and then there's support team around him. But there's really an important guy in that whole team, and he's the guy at the back. And he's got everyone else's back, and he is not facing the direction of the intrusion into, or the invasion into the space, the danger, but he's got everyone else's back in case danger comes from the back. And it's that person that Tanya is talking about, that friends have your back, and we need to have full trust in the person that is behind us, our friends that have got our back, so that we can execute those things that God has got planned for us. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the preach, and I'll see you soon. Love you all.
Yeah. It's so cool. It almost felt like he was a little bit here. So that was point number 1, friends have our back. And point number 2 is friends multiply our strength. And you know, Jonathan had strength. He was full of courage. But actually, that armor bearer came up behind him and multiplied the strength that he had. And it wasn't by more strength. It was by faith in him. It was by his backing and support. And point number 3, friends celebrate our success. So I want to take a look at a devastating and tragic relationship in the Bible, and that is the relationship between David and Saul. You see, initially Saul loves and honors David, but things turn very sour when David becomes successful. So we all know the story of David and Goliath, and David went out and killed Goliath, who had taunted the Israelites for 40 days, and nobody else could take him on, and yet there he was. He went and did what no one else could do. But after he killed Goliath and they came back, and the women in the city were singing with tambourines, Saul kills by thousands and David kills by 10,000. Wow, that made Saul very angry. He took it as a personal insult. And he says these words, they credit David for 10,000 and me with only 1,000. Before you know it, they will be giving him the kingdom. And from that moment onwards, everything changed for Saul. And he became obsessed with David for all the wrong reasons. He actually became quite raving mad, because jealousy gave way to a spiritual attack. And the more successful David became, the more fearful and deranged, in a sense, Saul became. And the writing was on the wall. He could not be happy for David's success. He could have celebrated him, but instead he chose to be jealous. And that jealousy gave way to insecurity, pride, and rebellion. And it was the beginning of the end for Saul. It changed the trajectory not only of his relationship with David, but also his whole life. It ate away at his soul like an insidious virus, changing him from a respected king into a bloodthirsty madman. But in contrast, let's look at the relationship between Jonathan and David. You see, Saul's son, Jonathan, the rightful heir to the throne, responds to David's success completely differently. He gives David his unconditional love and support. And in my opinion, gives one of the finest displays of unconditional self-sacrificial love, which was a beautiful foreshadow of the love and sacrifice that was going to be made for us by Jesus. I was doing so well without the tears. I'm going to think of Julie's story. Oh, okay. So instead of being jealous of David, which he could have been, in 1 Samuel 18, this is what it says. By the time David had finished reporting to Saul, Jonathan was deeply impressed with David, and an immediate bond was forged between them. He became totally committed to David. From that point on, he would be David's number one advocate and friend. Jonathan, out of his deep love for David, made a covenant with him. He formalized it with solemn gifts, his own royal robe, weapons, armor, sword, bow, and belt. What an amazing example of what it looks like to truly celebrate someone else's success. And point number 4, very closely linked, our friends are humble. You see, later on, Jonathan says these words. He says, "You will be king over Israel, and I will become second to you." Now remember that he was the rightful heir to the throne. He was the king's son. He was also strong and capable. It's not like he was weak and incapable. He took on a Philistine army. He was also 30 years David's senior, and yet he was so humble that he stepped aside and allowed David to take his place. And this also reminds me of the humility of Jesus, who poured himself out and humbly gave himself for us. So point number 5, and just in case you're wondering and watching your watches, I've got 6 points. But I'm so clever that number 5 is 2 points in 1. So, yeah. See, I'm telling you, I don't tell the kids that. Yeah. So number 5 is friends take a bullet for you and help you find your strength. You see 2 there, but I put them together because actually there's a beautiful story of something that takes place which beautifully illustrates both of those points. You see, Jonathan loved David so much, and he was so committed in this friendship to him that he risked his life to warn David that his father Saul was plotting to kill him, and he assisted in his escape. And this unleashed a fury from his father that his father says this to him in 1 Samuel. It says, Saul was furious with Jonathan and yelled, "You are no son of mine, you traitor. I know you've chosen to be loyal to that son of Jesse. You should be ashamed of yourself. And your own mother should be ashamed that you were even born. You'll never be safe. And your kingdom will be in danger as long as that son of Jesse is alive. Turn him over to me. Now he deserves to die." Sure. And then, as if that is not bad enough, Saul threw a spear at Jonathan and tried to kill him. And that was the moment that Jonathan knew that Saul was really serious about killing David. You see, his feelings never changed for David. Doesn't matter what the circumstances was, doesn't matter what the risk was. His love remained. And David had to go off and run and hide. He spent so much of his life running and hiding from Saul. He was a fugitive, constantly on the run, because Saul wanted him dead so badly. It was exhausting. And Jonathan once again risked his life to go and encourage David. His only motive was to help him find strength. So I'm going to read from 1 Samuel 23. David stayed in hideouts on the hill country. Saul kept searching, but God never let Saul catch him. One time David was Horich in Zipper Desert. He was afraid because Saul had come to the area to kill him. But Jonathan went to see David, and God helped him encourage David. "Don't be afraid," Jonathan said. "My father Saul will never get his hands on you. In fact, you are going to be the next king of Israel, and I'll be your highest official. Even my father knows this is true." and they both promised to the Lord that they would be loyal to each other. Then Jonathan went home, but David stayed at Horesh. How beautiful. He risked his life because he knew that David would need courage. In his moment of weakness, he never forgot. He was there for him. And in the years that followed, David would hold tightly onto this memory because it was their last time together. Thank goodness for the water. And Jonathan's hope to be second and be underneath David was never realized. Point number 6, and we're not even near the end. Don't worry. No, I'm joking. Friends are loyal and they never forget. 1 Samuel 20, verse 15. This is Jonathan. Pray that the Lord will bless you, just as he used to bless my father. Someday the Lord will wipe out all of your enemies. Then, if I'm still alive, please be as kind to me as the Lord has been. But if I'm dead, please be kind to my family. David and Jonathan made a covenant. And in that covenant, David promised to be kind to Jonathan's family. And Jonathan and his brothers, alongside their father, were killed in battle. Saul was wounded and took his own life. And David was devastated. And he wrote a poem including these words. I am distressed over you, my brother Jonathan. You were very dear to me. More wonderful was your love to me than the love of a woman. And David never forgot his vow to Jonathan. And Jonathan had a son called Mephibosheth. And when Mephibosheth was 5 years old, and when Saul had been killed, his nurse was afraid and took Mephibosheth and fled. And in that fleeing process, she dropped him, and he became forever disabled, unable to walk. David did not forget his promise, and in 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1 to 13, it says this. David asked, is there anyone still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, Mephibosheth, at your service, he replied. Don't be afraid, David said to him, for surely I will show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. I love that story. He never forgot, and he honored and restored Jonathan's land. And I think that this is the most beautiful story of kingdom biblical friendship, the friendship between David and Jonathan. But what does Jesus think about friendship? Jesus surrounded himself with friends. He was given a mission by God, as are we, and he chose 12 people to co-mission with him. He could have done it alone because he always had the company of his father, but he chose 12 people who he knew were weak, unreliable, who would disown him, and even one who would betray him. He thought that they were worth it. You know, there are a few, in my opinion, devastating scriptures in the Bible, and for me this is probably the most devastating. Matthew 26, verse 36 to 39. Jesus is about to go to the cross. And this is what it says. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. This kills me. This is Jesus. Yes, his feelings were so raw, and he was being so vulnerable. If Jesus can be this vulnerable and sorrowful, then so can we. And we have been. But this amazes me, is that when he is feeling sorrowful and vulnerable, he turns to his friends for support. And I love this because the scripture then goes on to say, then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Stay here and keep watch with me. In his time of greatest anguish and pain, he needed his friends. Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet, not as I will, but as you will. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour? He asked Peter. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. In the biggest crisis in Jesus' life, when he needed his friends the most, they fell asleep. Did you know that there are many species of animals, reptiles, insects that play dead? When faced with a predator, their response is to play dead. It's kind of like an involuntary immobility as a way of protecting themselves, roll over and die. It just interests me so much that these disciples fell asleep. And I feel like maybe that's what happens to us sometimes. In our greatest crisis, they knew what was coming. They knew Jesus was going to the cross. They fell asleep. So in reality, the temptation often when we're in a crisis, and we've seen this over the last few years, is that people grow numb. They disengage from the pain so as not to face reality. But Jesus is saying, do not fall into temptation to disengage. Do not fall into temptation to fall asleep. Do not fall into temptation to go numb and isolate. We need to stay alert and awake so that God can give us the bigger picture in community. See, friends, these were some of Jesus' last words. We need to take them seriously. I'm going to repeat. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. When we are overwhelmed, in crisis, in pain, do we allow the flesh to dictate? Do we allow our need for sleep to rule over us? In my life, when I have faced a crisis, and I have faced many, and my soul feels overwhelmed with sorrow, I know I need my friends to watch and pray with me, to have my back. I need my companions. I need my tribe at my back, my encouragers, to put strength in me when there are days when I felt like I could not go another mile. And I know that there are many of you out here who might be thinking, well, I want that too. I also want that. Why does it look like everybody else has that, but I don't? And I want to say to you that for every time that I've had someone at my back supporting and encouraging me, I have had equally as many times when I have felt let down, disillusioned, and betrayed. Like, hey, friends, where are you? Like Jesus, none of us are exempt from that kind of disappointment. But like Jesus, who said his friends were worth it, my friends are worth it, you are worth it, your friends are worth it. Jesus knows, he's been there. So last week has probably been one of the busiest weeks I can remember having. And at school, I'm a teacher, and at school I felt like everybody wanted a piece of me, and I had so much to do. So I think it was on Tuesday, I had dismissed the girls, and I thought, right, I'm going to work. I'm not going to be disturbed, I'm just going to work. So I just got stuck in, and about 10 minutes in, one of the girls came into my classroom, and she wasn't from my class or even in my grade, and she said, Mrs. Tedder, I need you. And I thought, nothing else matters right now. She needs me. And she said, I feel invisible. I feel like I'm watching everybody else involved in friendships, and I feel like everybody has their people, and I feel like I'm on the outside. I feel like I'm not seen. And I feel like I want what they've got. And so I held her tight, and we cried, and I prayed for her. And I said, my darling, you are seen. You are loved. You are loved by the King of Kings. You are so important. So she said, so Mrs. Tedder, are you saying that it's okay that I can't have that because I have God? And she was trying to make sense of this. And I said, no, it's actually not okay. It's not okay that you don't have your people. So she said, well, what do I do? So I said, well, go and find people that you think might be feeling like you. Go and be somebody else's circle. Go and be somebody else's champion. And she has been doing that. And I really want to encourage you, if that's you, that are sitting on the outside, looking and thinking everybody else has these amazing friendships. Why do they have these friendships? Why am I excluded? Why don't I have what they have? Friendship is hard work, and it is reciprocal. Go and be a friend to somebody else. Push in. Go and find somebody that you can love on and bless and encourage. And maybe it's going to be a season where you're doing all the work and you're doing all the encouraging. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Are people going to hurt you? Yes. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Are people going to let you down? Disappoint you? Are they not going to be there for you when you need them the most? Probably. But it's worth it. Because it is one of Jesus' commands to us to love one another, to put your life on the line for one another. So I'm going to encourage you. And the fact that you're all here is amazing, because you're not sleeping at home. You're not disengaged. You are here. But if you have the tendency to go numb, to disengage, to disconnect, to save yourself from the pain, I want to encourage you to wake up and stay alert. There's a job to do. We've been called to co-mission with Christ. The mission is to bear fruit that will last. That looks like something. We cannot do that when we sit with ourselves. Yes, there's that space, and we've been doing that to process our pain and continue to do that. But the purpose of that is because he's calling us to bear fruit, because the world needs you. The world needs you. Your friends need you. We need you. Thank you for listening.